To video one of a multi-part series where we introduce the concepts of SEOs to early stage, very beginner level, aspiring entrepreneurs, marketers, business owners, just to give them a sense of what SEO is, how it works, without kind of glossing over the basic definitions. And it's going to move fast. It's not going to be drawn out. We're going to break this down into parts of what's most important, and if there's something that's too complex, we'll just introduce the concepts, but not make it too overwhelming. Who am I? My name is Ajay Paghdal. I've been in the SEO industry for several years now and started a few companies, had some successes. But I remember when I first got started with SEO, it took me a long time to get my head around the general concepts of how this stuff works. What are the key components? What are the things that, people talk about, but they're not really that important? And what are the things that people talk about, but actually can make or break what you do? Because we're getting started. We want good feedback loops. We don't want to keep on doing something and not knowing it works for a long time. And the nature of SEO is that it takes a long time. So you do something today, you don't see those results for several months down the line. And it can be intimidating when you're not sure if the thing you're doing is right. So it's easy to give up. But if you have a full understanding of how this stuff works, what's important, what's not important, what to focus on, A, you'll stick with it. B, it'll take you less time because you only focus on the stuff that's most important. And C, you probably have a better chance at success because you kind of know what the pathway to success is. For us to understand SEO, we need to understand the number one search engine on the planet, Google. We need to understand what they're looking for, what's important to them, right? What's Google's goal? Their goal, it's to learn what people find most valuable in terms of online content. If Google's concerned with what's most valuable, then it's our job as SEOs to encourage Google to reward us by being more valuable in their eyes. So if Google's looking for certain types of signals that are valuable, we want to show Google that we are those valuable things that they're looking for. And then if that happens, then when somebody goes to google.com and searches in a keyword, we're going to show up higher on the search engine results pages, which is a short version of that you can call SERPs. So here's the thing, though. It's Google that's setting the rules. It's up for us to decipher their handbook and then be able to work within those set of rules. We can't create our own rules, or we shouldn't really, because we want to be valuable in the way that Google wants us to be valuable. So as SEOs, as people doing search engine optimization, we have the singular job of making sure that we're valuable in terms of Google's definition of value. And not only are we valuable, but we're more valuable than all of our competitors, or most of our competitors. That begs the question, well, what does Google consider valuable? It's similar to what people value. Is the resource trustworthy, credible, authoritative? Is it relevant to the query? Is it not found in 100 other different places? So is it unique? And is it easy to understand? Does it make sense? Does it follow a logical pathway? Are people talking about it? Do people like it? And does it answer the question? And then on the flip side, we want to make sure that it's not certain things. Like it's not harmful, it's not annoying, and it's not misleading or deceptive. So it starts with, in order for Google to understand what's out there, it's got to be able to find it first. So you might assume that just because you hit the publish button on a blog post, that suddenly Google is aware of it, or that Google has the entire internet readily accessible and automatically found. But no, that's not really the case. See, just like a person, Google's got to be able to find your content before it can add it to its database and then use it when people are doing searches. If humans have 5 senses, then we can say that Google has 3. As time goes on, they're getting more. But let's look at the important ones. Number 1 is Google's web crawler, the Googlebot, which we'll get into in a second. And then there's different sources of data that Google uses, like traffic data, user behavior data. So let's start with the Googlebot. Now, the Googlebot is it's essentially what goes around crawling the internet, finding different pages and recrawling content. And as it finds a new page, it crawls through the text. It's following different links. It's going through your entire website. And when it finds the information that it wants, it's going to take it back to Google's data bank, Google's data center. It's going to take all that information and it's going to allow Google to take that information and add it to its database. In our case, that database is called a search index. And a common term for SEO is when people are waiting for a page to get indexed, they mean they're waiting for Google to find that page, find that URL. So we consider that being indexed, a web page getting indexed. So let's say, and when I say crawler, it's like a piece of code that's just, there's probably millions of Google bots crawling through the web. Google has the biggest search index on the planet. And even though it has this massive search index, I think there's some stats out there that Google's only aware of like a minuscule part of the web. So there's still this whole other massive section of the web that Google either is not interested in or Google has not found yet. But if Google does find something, what are the things that the bot is looking for? We'll run through all four of these: the URLs, the metadata, the anchor text, and the content. But we talked about Google's three senses. We just talked about the Google bot. Now let's talk about sense number two, which is traffic data. You think about traffic data in terms of, it's kind of a measure of how popular a thing is. So it gives Google hints about the quality and value of web pages. If something is more popular and receiving more traffic, Google will give it more value. This traffic data is generated from Google's data. It's added to Google's database with other relevant information, such as the referral source of that traffic. Let's say Huffington Post did an article about the latest trends in dog training, and it happened to be a really popular article. And in that article, they interviewed you, and you happen to be the owner of a dog training academy. And then people say, "Wow, this is a really amazing quote." They click on the link from the Huffington Post article to your site. Google's seeing that traffic, right? They're seeing that there's this popular article on Huffington Post that talks about dog training, and then people from that page are going to your site because of a link, and that's relevant, that's high quality, it's valuable. So you're getting some good signals that way, and that's an example of how traffic data is applied. So the way that Google gets this data is obviously Google.com. People are searching within Google.com. If they go to Google.com, for example, they're typing in dog training. They're clicking on this listing, and they're seeing how many people are clicking on this listing and what they're doing on the page, where they go from there. You notice I'm actually using Google Chrome. Google Chrome is owned by Google, and whatever people are doing in Google Chrome is trackable by Google. So they're getting this massive amount of data because of this. They can also purchase traffic data from massive sites. They also own other properties that are high volume, like YouTube, Google Maps, and they have a whole AdSense network where they're able to get data. So they have tons of different ways to get traffic data information. And number three is user metrics. Essentially, you saw me click on this this dog training page right now. If I did that search and I click here and then I spend 10 minutes here and then I close the browser, what is that telling Google? It's telling Google that the number one result, it got the click, but the user actually stayed on the page, and the user didn't immediately go back to Google and then look at the second listing. Because imagine if Google's trying to provide you the best possible result, and just because something gets to number one, it doesn't necessarily mean that Google is convinced it's the number one result yet. Obviously, there's certain really good signals, but if 1,000 people a day are doing the search for dog training and they click on this first page, and then immediately within 10 seconds they bounce back and they click on some other listing, it's telling Google that, hey, maybe this article actually isn't that good because users don't seem to be getting the value from it that they should. And sometimes the intended action of a result is to go to a page, look at something for 10 seconds and come back and do something else and do another search. Maybe it's a quick answer, but if you're looking for something that's in depth, takes a lot of time to learn, is research based, chances are user metrics need to be a high time on site. And Google knows that Google's getting very smart with understanding keyword intent and what people are trying to do when they search for different things. So they're getting all this data and it's all going back into Google's database. And that's how Google's getting this picture of your website. So think about these as certain things that Google collects as user metrics. Like I discussed, time spent on a URL. If there's a video, how many plays it got, how deeply do people generally watch through it. If there's ads, how many clicks you get. If there's links in an article, how many clicks those links get and where those links are going, and how people interact on those pages where the links are going. And they can even get as savvy as understanding the action of a certain button on a page and being able to identify success or failure. So really, it's whatever a human can do on the web, Google is trying to track it, or they're already tracking it. So essentially, Google's used all its senses and it's come up with a lot of data. And this is actually where Google's job gets even more difficult, because now it has to analyze this data. And for a certain keyword search, it's got to say, okay, of these 35 million web pages, this page is the most relevant, and this is the second most relevant, and this is the third most relevant. So you can compare this to how humans do it, just kind of naturally and passively. They'll get data, they'll compare data according to, how their brain works, what they think is important, what's not important. And if something matches their worldview of what's valuable, great. If not, then they reject it. Okay, that's similar to what Google's trying to create with their algorithm and eventual AI, is just understanding what's valuable and not valuable. If humans have a paradigm, then Google also has a paradigm that's ever changing and ever evolving. We call it the Google algorithm. Simply put, it's a set of complex computer programs. And when all mixed together with all the different ranking factors, it helps you determine the order of search engine result pages. Okay, and their ideal goal is to create the most relevant and valuable content for any search query. So how does it do it? Here's just some of the steps that the algorithm can go through. Now, if I do a search and I say drug training, it's going to say showing results for dog training, because it's analyzing the search that I just did, and it's trying to understand the true intent. Okay. And then it's going to go through the index and it's going to look for certain signals like, okay, there's a keyword here in the URL, there's a keyword here in the title, there's a keyword potentially somewhere in the content. So it's trying to figure out what keywords, keyword optimization matches the keyword search. And then it's also looking at other things that you don't see right away. It's looking at how old is the content? How many backlinks does the content have, which we can go into in a bit. If it's a geolocation-based search, it's seeing, well, if I type in dog training, I didn't say dog training in New York City, which is where I'm at, but I'm getting New York City ads pop up. I'm getting New York City local businesses and getting local businesses in New York City. And then I'm getting probably some national results thrown in here as well. So I'm getting a mixture, and Google's understanding that dog training, even though I didn't put in New York City, it's figuring out that I probably mean New York City. Whether I do or don't sometimes is debatable, but that's why Google's job is pretty difficult. It's got all of these factors to kind of figure out. So you might, look at what I just said and think that keywords are the most valuable. But we talked about a lot of other different things here as well, and these are just as valuable. And these are really the things that will make or break an SEO campaign. Sure, it's simple enough to include your keyword in a title and a URL and sprinkle it in throughout the content. But what do you do when that's done? That's when SEO starts getting more complex. And that's when people start kind of washing out if they can't figure out how to do it. And that's what I want to give you a end-to-end kind of high-level overview of what some of those things are. So you don't get stuck at just one part of it. That being said, we should focus on keywords a little bit. What we do know about keywords is that uh, each keyword that Google does a query for can be considered individually scored. Right? So someone does a keyword search, Google goes through its database and it's providing an individual score for which pieces of content in its index are most relevant for the keyword query. So if you go down the rabbit hole, you're obviously you want to find keywords that have a high search volume, but have low quote unquote competition. And understanding how to find search volume, understanding how to figure out what has low competition, those are things we can talk about. So if keywords are important, what about the actual content on your page? Of course, Google is going to find the content you create. It's going to probably index most of it, but it doesn't mean that it considers it valuable. Google also has a grading mechanism for what kind of content is high quality, what kind of content is low quality. And you have to remember that the internet is a mature place. So you have tons and tons of competitors that are going after the same keywords, and some of them are savvy marketers and SEOs, and they're creating amazing content. So if you're in a competitive industry, you need to make sure what amazing content looks like so you can compete properly. Because if you're not doing that and you're creating poor quality content, Google's got these advanced algorithms that's able to understand that. Not only can they read the content and grade the content, but they have user metrics and traffic data, and they know exactly how people are reacting to content. So it's very hard nowadays to get by with anything less than really good content. So what happens if you go out there and create something that's not so good, or maybe it's duplicate, or it's possible sometimes that that unique individual page is penalized or deranked or removed from the index even. These are rare occurrences. They rarely happen. Usually if it's just bad content, it just doesn't get visibility. But sometimes if your website has a pattern of behavior, things can get dangerous. What are some of the things that can lead to penalties, danger? To understand, how Google looks to catch people who are trying to manipulate it, you have to understand that there's only so much Google can hide behind in terms of how their algorithm works. SEOs are pretty crafty, they're pretty smart, they're good at testing, and they're good at understanding what the algorithm likes and it doesn't like. So once it figures out this thing that the algorithm likes, chances are you can put together like highly manipulative, automated, scaled ways to keep giving those signals, and the algorithm picks up on those and it gives you high rankings, and then eventually Google might find it, and that's a reason for it to penalize you. A poor user experience, lots of pop-ups, misleading information, things that create a high bounce rate, which is someone going to your site and immediately going back. Those things are possible as well. Now, what is keyword stuffing? In general, people think that, well, I want to go after this keyword, so I'm going to write this keyword 20 times within this 500-word article. The problem is that the robots used to like that stuff, but even they don't like that anymore. But if a person is going to find your article and it just sees the keyword stuffing and it doesn't actually see value, or they don't actually see value, what are they going to do? They're probably going to bounce and you get poor user experience. We haven't talked much about anchor text, but anchor text, I'll give you an example of anchor text. All right. Let's say I click on this article here and I'm going through this article and I'm reading and I'm enjoying it. And then they mention this dog's life as a link in this article. So this part that's highlighted, this dog's life, this is actually considered the anchor text. All right. I'm going through here and it says Andrea Arden founded Andrea Arden Training in 1994. This is the anchor text for this link. And look at this anchor text right here. This says dog-friendly dog training. Okay. Now this is an anchor text, and it's actually a keyword-rich anchor text. So Google's looking at these links, and it's looking at the anchor text, and it's using that as a signal for relevance of what that link might be about. This link is probably about dog-friendly dog training. This link is probably about how to train your dog the lazy way. So it's taking those signals. But what SEOs realized a long time ago is that they can manipulate the Google algorithm by creating a bunch of anchor text that has the keyword in it. And then Google is going to say, wow, this web page is really, really relevant for this keyword. We're going to rank them really high for this keyword. And nowadays, Google's algorithm is smarter, so this kind of stuff looks unnatural. And on top of that, even if you are doing your anchor text okay, if all of your links are coming from low quality sites, like let's say, for example, this is Lauren Leash, okay? And Lauren Leash has this website. Now let's say this dog's life was actually like a really cheap, spammy site with just like garbage content. And let's say there were 100 other websites just like this one, and they were all linking to Lauren's Leash. Well, you are who you surround yourself with in Google's eyes and most people's eyes. So if Lauren Leash is only surrounded by these really spammy websites that have terrible content, Google's going to assume that this brand is probably not that good. So we don't want that either. And we talked about Google wanting unique content. So if you have duplicate content, that's not a good signal of quality. But just because Google doesn't like something, it doesn't mean that they're going to remove it from their database or their index. However, if you're a repeat offender or you do something very egregious, Google might just remove you completely from their index. And the only way to get back on is to ask for a reconsideration through this whole process, and it takes time. And it's just something you want to avoid. And most of the time, this comes down to trying to scam the algorithm somehow, either through like mass creation of duplicate pages or automated backlink schemes or anchor text over optimization. So lots of different ways that Google will choose to de-index you. But those are some of the most common ones. So let's wrap it up with a recap of what we learned so far. So in my opinion, we're not trying to manipulate Google. We're trying to become Google's friend. And we want to do things the way Google likes it because then they'll reward us. And we can understand what it likes by trying to understand their algorithm, right? And just because Google adds our page to their index, it doesn't necessarily mean that it considers it valuable yet. And just like a person's paradigm or way of thinking changes, Google's algorithm changes constantly, several times a year, and probably 1 or 2 major updates per year. So it's good to always stay on the side of great quality content, good quality links, because those are the kind of things that Google won't change. And while it's fun to experiment with messing around with the algorithm and seeing how you can pull different levers and seeing if the algorithm reacts the way that you want it to, it makes sense not to experiment on any sites that you really, really care about. So that's it for the introduction of what Google wants, how it works. In the upcoming videos, we're going to talk about how to dress your website for success. We're going to be talking about how a further look into what Google is seeing on your website when it's crawling through it. We're going to show you the things that you need to do off of your website through link building and promotion that are really going to make the difference between making or breaking an SEO campaign. And then we're going to talk about some more advanced things like schema markup. So stay tuned. And if you have any questions, leave a comment. You can email me at ajay@linkio.com. Thanks a lot, and see you in the next video.